Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome again to this week's Morning Coffee and a Thought, brought to you by Wings of Faith Ministries here in Sarnia, Ontario. Great to be with you again. I've got my coffee here. I hope you have yours. You know, I was thinking the other day that I probably delivered 2,500 sermons in my life. And yet, as I was thinking about it, I asked myself the question, how well do you really know the person you've been preaching about, Jesus Christ? Because there is so much to know. But as I went through that thought, I thought, wouldn't it be great to have Jesus sit at your kitchen table for a couple of hours and really get to talk to him? But the more I thought about it, the more I think the themes of a conversation like that would be fully covered in Matthew chapters 5 through 7 in what we call the Sermon on the Mount. And so for the next few weeks, we're going to do some morning coffees on the sermon. Now, I'm not sure we'll cover all of it, but we'll certainly try to cover the main points that Jesus speaks in this sermon. First of all, I want to remind you that Morning Coffee and a Thought can be seen every Friday afternoon beginning at 1 p.m. and every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. on our Facebook page. On Friday, it's on our YouTube channel. Also, join us for Journey of Insight. It comes out on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Al and I are discussing the foundational truths of the Christian faith. If you want any information, if you have a prayer request, or you want to make a donation to the ministry, you can reach out to us at wingsoffaithministries.ca. Now, to do this introduction for the sermon, I'm kind of going to go backwards. And I want to talk about the last verses on the Sermon on the Mount. But before we get there, just a little introduction. So there are 5 major discourses of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew. And of course, the Sermon on the Mount is the first major discourse, and it is the longest discourse. And of course, its importance is stated by the fact that it occurs in chapters 5 through 7. Only Jesus' baptism, his time in the wilderness, and his calling of the first disciples precede the Sermon on the Mount. Now, as a literary device, Matthew has Jesus delivered this sermon on a mountainside. And of course, the image he's trying to draw here goes back to the Old Testament and the lawgiver Moses, who of course was on Mount Sinai when he delivered the 10 Commandments. Matthew is trying to draw a direct parallel back to Moses, saying we have a new set of concepts that will be the kingdom of God. And so a beautiful literary device Matthew uses here, comparing Jesus and the new concepts, the new laws, so to say, back to Moses and the first commandments they received in the wilderness of Mount Sinai. So let's go on to the last part of this sermon. In this life, you and I, no matter who we are, you can have status, not have any status. You can be wealthy, you can be poor. But no matter where you are in life and who you are in life, you're going to face 3 things. You're going to face the winds of adversity. You're going to experience overwhelming floods. And you're going to have rainy days. Nobody on this planet is exempt from the trials of life, no matter who you are or how wealthy you are. The question is, how are you going to cope in life? And that's what the last part of the Sermon on the Mount is about. But before we get into the sermon in the following weeks, I thought we better cover Jesus' summary here, because he gives us a choice as people of which way to go. Jesus will say here about two homes being built, two houses, one on a very firm foundation, one on kind of a sandy one. So he says, whoever builds on the solid rock, and how are we going to build on that solid rock? He says, whoever hears and then practices my words every day in their daily life will be building on a solid foundation. The winds are going to come, the floods are going to come, the rainy days are going to come, but if your life is built on the words and then the practices of Jesus Christ, you're going to stand in those trying times. And not only stand, but be able to cope with them and not have them tarnish your life in the long term. But there's the other choice. Jesus said, if you hear my words but decide not to follow me, to not have me a part of your daily life, it'll be like building a house on sand. The same trials are going to come. The winds of adversity are going to blow. The overwhelming floods are going to come into your life. There's going to be rainy days. The problem is, without building on Jesus, these trials and tribulations are going to tarnish your life. Christ said that house will have a great fall, as opposed to the house built on a rock, which will stand through all the trials and tribulations of life. None of us are immune to them. None of us. We're all going to experience the trials and tribulations that come to everyone on this planet. The question becomes, how do we cope with them? And Jesus will lay out principles in this sermon. Principles, I believe, that if he was sitting at my kitchen table and we had 2 hours to spend together, these are the exact same things he would say to me in that meeting. And so, we want to look in the next following weeks to the Sermon on the Mount. And we have to decide if we want to build our house on a rock or on sand. And that meaning, do we want to hear and then practice the words of Jesus? Or do we want to hear and just put it aside and say, I can run my life better than Christ can run my life? Those were the choices he brought to the people at the end of that sermon. Next week, we're going to look at the Beatitudes, the introduction to the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5. Listen, have a great morning, and we'll talk to you again next week.